the mood of the nation?
The mood is as grim as I've ever seen it in about 30 years of living and reporting in this country. I don't remember another moment this dark in Israel. People who remember the Yom Kippur War of 1973 compare it to that, but in some ways it's worse because most of the dead in this case are civilians, and there's barely a country in Israel that hasn't been touched by the tragedy.
And is that because some of the real pillars that make this nation, intelligence and defence, have been rocked by this, and therefore people's faith in those institutions has been sorely damaged?
I think that's true. I think there's several layers here. The first one, of course, is personal. Most people know someone who was killed by Hamas on October 7th. And I can give you a few examples from my own personal life. Over the last week, I took my two 16-year-old sons to a funeral, the funeral of a kid that they knew. I had to explain to my 7-year-old why we're running in and out of the safe room when the rocket sirens go off. My daughter, who's 12, has a classmate whose cousin was killed and whose best friend, her best friend's cousin, was also killed. So there's a lot of talk about death in our house and a lot more grief than you want around your children. And that's the first layer of it for everyone here. The second layer is a feeling that we've been let down by the systems that we trust. The army, which we think of as a dependable guardian of civilians, was asleep and was caught off guard, and the price has been unbearable. The government of Israel failed at its most important mission, which is keeping us safe. And because we live in such a perilous region, and because we depend on these systems so much to keep us safe from the storm around us in the Middle East, the crisis of faith here is very deep, and the sense of a loss of personal safety is very real.
So is it recoverable, that sense? And going into Gaza, would that make people somehow feel better? The revenge, the being able to avenge those deaths? Do you think, is that necessary for people?
The incursion into Gaza won't be revenge. What it will be is an attempt to remove a threat that is unbearable to us. We can't leave in place an organization that just murdered 1,000 innocent people in cold blood. So it's not a matter of vengeance, although I won't deny that there is that stream, of course, in this society, as there would be in any society in similar circumstances. But the desire here is to remove this threat. We can't live with an organization that is capable of barbarism on the scale that we just witnessed, and something needs to be done. There are very few Israelis who are happy to go into Gaza. It's clear that the price for us will be high, and the price for people in Gaza, including many innocent people, will be high. No one wants it, but Hamas has put us in a position where that is unavoidable, and I think Hamas understands that. I think they understood it before they embarked on this episode, and I think everyone else in the Middle East is watching us. And in the Middle East, if you allow something like this to be done to you and you let it stand, then you have no existence in the Middle East. You're done. So what you're going to see, I think, is quite a dramatic response, which I hope will move us all, Israelis, Palestinians, and everyone else in the region, into a better place. But it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be quite painful for us and for our neighbors.
The sense, though, is that you go in to crush and destroy Hamas, and in so doing, you crush and destroy Gaza. Does that sit comfortably with you?
The hope is that maximum damage can be inflicted on Hamas, with minimum damage being inflicted on civilians in Gaza. Hamas has constructed a military landscape in Gaza over the past 15 years that is indistinguishable from the civilian landscape. So Hamas rocket stores are kept under civilian structures, under civilian institutions like schools. Hamas headquarters are underground, in some cases underneath hospitals. So there is no way to fight Hamas without inflicting harm on civilians, and that is the way Hamas wants it. That's how they've built it. They put civilians in between them and us so that in the hope that we might not strike because we don't want to harm civilians, or in the hopes that if we do harm civilians, that will be shown on television and can be used to blunt our response. So this is part of Hamas strategy. I think the Western liberal mind, the kind of mind that I have, really boggles at that kind of tactic, and it took me years in the Middle East to understand that that was actually what's going on. But it's a very ugly kind of warfare, and unfortunately we're fighting the war that Hamas wanted. They decided on October 7th to start a war, and they're largely deciding how it will be fought. And the way it will be fought, again, is incredibly ugly and painful, not just for us, but for innocent Palestinians who are caught in the middle and who are in many ways hostages of a terror organization.
how difficult is it that hostages have been taken, both Israeli hostages and dual nationals too? So there'll be governments around the world putting pressure, on Israeli forces not to go in to protect their citizens. So how much of a complicating factor is that?
I think it's very much a complicating factor. The army just released a number. They say 199 people are hostages in Gaza. We've never seen any number like that. For many years, for about 5 years, there was a single Israeli soldier held hostage in Gaza, starting in 2006, Gilad Shalit, and this was a huge issue for Israelis, and his release cost us 1,000 Palestinian security prisoners, and now we're talking about 200 people, including dual nationals. So, of course, this is a complicating factor. Will it keep Israel from doing what it feels that it needs to do to remove this threat? I don't think so. I don't think it will. It might delay it, but it won't prevent it.
Matti Friedman, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's go back to that breaking news now from Brussels. Belgium